Alright, boys, here we go. I'm going to do something that has never been attempted before. I'm going to try and cover all 30 NBA teams in a single video. My name is Alex. I do basketball. I assume you want to do basketball too. Let's go. Let's start off with the Anthony Davis trade. I'm going to start with the Lakers side, and later we're going to talk about the Pelicans side. So the deal was Anthony Davis to the Pelicans for Lonzo Ball, Josh Hart, Brandon Ingram, DeAndre Hunter, who they traded for Jackson Hayes, and they got Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who is the cousin of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He's pretty good. He can probably shoot. They also got some draft and stash player who probably won't play this year. And 2 more first-round picks, the right to swap picks, and some money. And then the Lakers also sent Isaac Bonga, Jamario Jones, and Moritz Wagner to the Wizards. And they actually ended up sending Isaac Bonga to the Pelicans, which I didn't know about. Now the Lakers got Anthony Davis. The Lakers got Anthony Davis. And they managed to keep Kyle Kuzma while they were doing it, and that's the point that everyone is selling. If you get AD and Kyle Kuzma on the same team, then you're pretty much good. Because Kuzma, if he's going to start, would be a great fit with both LeBron and AD, and also with Rondo, with everyone who's on the floor. He'd be a great fit with. And if he doesn't, then he will be pretty good coming off the bench. He's a volume scorer. He can do a lot of stuff. He can play off the dribble, hit threes, potentially even make some plays. I don't know. Kyle Kuzma averaged like 2.5 assists as a power forward, and that was with 3 ball-dominant playmakers on the wings and at point. So he does get involved in the offense a lot. He did only shoot like 30% on threes, but it was on like 6 attempts. But the year before that, he had shot 5.5 attempts and shot 36%. So that's something of a drop-off. They did lose out on Josh Hart, who would have been a pretty good fit for them. But you have to give up something if you want to get Anthony Davis. Brandon Ingram looked nice, but so did Lonzo Ball, and there has to be some sort of a main piece in the trade. You can't just give up nothing for AD. The Pelicans could have demanded Kyle Kuzma if they really wanted to, but I don't think the Lakers would have done it then. I don't know. It worked out. They did it. The Wizards took in their bums. Moritz Wagner is kind of not a bum, but he's still not really quite a rotation guy. By the way, they signed DeMarcus Cousins. He should be great. He knows Anthony Davis. He hopefully has recuperated completely from his injury, and I think they have a shot at the championship. They made some other low-key free agent signings. They signed Danny Green. That was great for them. They got pretty much an older Josh Hart. An older, better Josh Hart. They got Quinn Cook. And I think they're going to have to choose between him and Alex Caruso being their third stringers. By the way, they re-signed him to a good contract. 2 years, about $5.5 million. They also got Quinn Cook on a 2-year deal worth $6 million. The last year is non-guaranteed. I think they'll keep him, though. And they also re-signed Caldwell Pope to a 2-year, $16 million deal. I don't know about that one, Chief. He hasn't been that amazing. They signed Avery Bradley. That was a good pickup. They re-signed JaVale McGee. Pretty good pickup. He's been good. He was good for them. Rondo's on a 2-year contract with a player option. KCP also has a player option next year. JaVale McGee has a player option. They still have Luol Deng's dead money for the next 3 years until assumedly LeBron retires. So that is going to hinder them for the remainder of his contract. And yeah, that's about it for the Lakers. I'm going to try and do 3 teams all at once. That would be the Wolves, the Warriors, and the Hornets. Let's go from best to worst. Okay. Warriors. They got D'Angelo Russell. They lost KD, but they managed to sneak it in for a sign and trade. Unfortunately, they did lose a first-round pick. But I mean, it's fine. It's the Warriors. Who cares? They don't need first-round picks. They have Curry and Clay. Clay's injury might be a problem for them. ACL tears are never good. It wasn't quite a tear, but any ACL injury is pretty delicate. They lost Cousins, not as big of a loss as they replaced him with Willie Cauley-Stein, but I mean, wouldn't you rather have DeMarcus Cousins than Willie Cauley-Stein, right? I mean, yeah. Willie Cauley-Stein is still a nice pickup for them, don't get me wrong. As a sort of little consolation prize to the Timberwolves for not getting D'Angelo Russell, and instead they gave them Travion Graham and Shabazz Napier. That's not the best consolation prize in my opinion. By the way, D'Angelo Russell is probably going to be playing shooting guard for them. He'll have to if he doesn't want to be coming off the bench. I mean, everyone knew that anyway, so yeah, you know. Klay Thompson probably won't be back until after the trade deadline. So if they're not planning on spending like a quarter of the season maybe with just Curry and like maybe Draymond Green as their stars, then I definitely see them keeping D'Angelo Russell for the whole season. They recently traded for Omari Spellman. The deal was Damian Jones and a second-round draft pick for him. So, being that his skill set is pretty similar to Draymond Green's and that Draymond Green is going to be a free agent next season, I think that the Warriors are gearing up to let him go. Next thing. I was going to talk about the Wolves. I'm a little disappointed in their offseason. I'm going to be really honest. They lost Taj Gibson and replaced him with Jordan Bell and Noah Vonleh. Those guys are alright. They're not great. They're okay. I can take them. They're on small contracts. Jake Layman, we signed him to a 3-year deal. He's good. But those guys mostly aren't anything except for depth guys and assets for trades. As I mentioned, we got our second string point guard in Shabazz Napier. And we did lose Tyus Jones, but if we had kept him, we would have been overpaying. We did get Tyrone Wallace, though. He's okay. I can take him. He was on the Clippers. He was pretty good for them. We drafted Jarrett Culver, and I think that was a great decision because he kind of is the Wiggins foil. They're both wings. They're both ball-handling wings. But where Wiggins can't shoot, Culver is pretty okay at it. Where Wiggins loses the ball every third dribble, Culver can actually handle the ball and make plays. Where Wiggins misses a wide open layup at the rim, or he won't ever because he's still too athletic. But Jarrett Culver will actually finish through contact, unlike Wiggins, who will miss his layup at the slightest contest. The only thing that he doesn't do as well as Andrew Wiggins is be athletic, because he can hit mid-range jumpers just as well as Andrew Wiggins. We have Josh Okogie, whatever. Okogie, I'm gonna call him Okogie. He's pretty good. He played defense. He made plays. He was good. I like him. I want to keep him. Keita Joke, I like him. He's good on defense. He can probably shoot he's probably kind of okay at threes, but I think we'd rather include him in a trade along with Andrew Wiggins. And we will. I'll get to that. But first, I want to talk about the Hornets. They're awful. They're just garbage. They're like worst team in the league kind of garbage. So are the Cavs. I'm actually going to include them in this too, because there's something I want to talk about for them too. The Hornets, they lost Kemba, but at least they got something for him. They got Terry Rozier, But instead of not trading him and then lowballing him so that he walks, they could have either traded him mid-season or offered him like something at least close to the max. And they probably still wouldn't have got Terry Rozier, but that doesn't matter when you have Kemba Walker. Now they have Terry Rozier and pretty much nobody else. They have Malik Monk, who is okay, but he's probably fitted more for a sixth man role than being a starter. He's a guy who can be inconsistent but come off the bench in quick spurts and score offense. Miles Bridges, kind of a similar thing. He is not good for much except like dunking and then defense. I mean, he's kind of okay at shooting, but other than that, it's just dunking. PJ Washington, he was a low-key win for the Charlotte Hornets. He can space the floor, go off the dribble, be a big body, maybe play both wing positions. I saw some people suggest that he was basically Paul Millsap. I don't agree with that. Paul Millsap's not really an energy guy. I can see him probably being like one of the Morris twins. When I read the first part of the scouting report, I thought Kenneth Faried. So maybe Kenneth Faried / Paul Millsap, which makes like Marcus / Markieff Morris. They have a bunch of expiring contracts. That's good for them because that means they can tank and they can just let those guys go at the end of the season. And then they have two guys that will be expiring contracts next year in Nicholas Batum and Cody Zeller, so those may be easy to get rid of. They have Willie Hernangomez, who can kind of shoot. I don't know much about him beyond that. They seemed high on Devontae Graham, surprisingly, last year, so he could fill out the backup point guard role. And that's about it for them. There's not much to talk about. They're trash. And the Cavs are part of this too. They have a bunch of expiring deals in guys like Matthew Dellavedova, Brandon Knight, John Henson, Tristan Thompson, etc., etc. One guy I would want to re-sign is Jordan Clarkson. He was a good scorer and is relatively young, so he kind of fits the timeline of these guys. He can go off the dribble and just generally be a very good backup point guard, shooting guard, combo guard, whatever you want him to be. And yeah, he's good. They definitely have some young guys. I'm not sure that the attempt at recreating Lillard and CJ is going to work though, because if they wanted to do that, they probably should have drafted Kobe White. He's bigger, better defensively. They had the draft pick to do it. Yeah, they could have done that, but instead they took Darius Garland, who I guess is okay at playing off the ball. I don't know. I hope so, because Colin Sexton is probably going to have to be more of a playmaker, or else he might play off the ball. They were testing stuff like that by putting him alongside Brandon Knight in some lineups last year. So that might be something. They still have Larry Nance Jr., who's okay. Kevin Love, they kind of have to trade, but not many people want him with his long contract, which was a dumb decision even before he got injured. But I guess some teams might want him, like, say, one of the teams I just talked about. Cedi Osman looks very good. They surprisingly kept J.R. Smith, so he's just another expiring contract. Ante Zizic looks okay. Dylan Windler, he's a shooting guard and small forward who could play off the bench. He'll be okay. Kevin Porter Jr., shooting guard. They picked him up late in the draft via the Bucks pick. They did good drafting outside their lottery pick. And Colin Sexton, well, last year he shot 40% from 3, which I think most people didn't expect. 43% overall from the field, which is pretty okay for a point guard. He had a 25.2% usage rate. He averaged 16 points per game last year. he might actually be able to play off the ball, I guess. He only took three and a half attempts a game, though. So it's kind of a smallish sample size. He averaged 3 assists on 2 turnovers. So that's a pretty bad assist to turnover ratio. 3-2. It's not ideal. They'll have to get his assist numbers up if they want him to be a point guard. Or else they just slide him over to shooting guard and have Darius Garland run the point. Anyway, the trade that is going to happen. The Hornets receive Andrew Wiggins, possibly Draymond Green in a sign-and trade, Keita Bates-Diop, Damian Lee, a first-round pick from the Warriors, and a first-round pick from the Wolves. In 2022 and 2021 respectively, with whatever levels of protection they choose to put on. The Warriors receive Robert Covington, Gorgui Dieng, Jake Layman, a 2021 second-round pick from the Wolves, and a 2020 second-round pick from the Wolves. The Timberwolves get D'Angelo Russell, Nicholas Batum, Cody Zeller, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist in a sign and trade, sort of, for like $7 million a year, and then Jacob Evans. And then, later in the season, like maybe a month in, the Timberwolves trade Nicholas Batum, Cody Zeller, and Jordan Bell, who they recently signed, to the Cavs for Kevin Love, a protected 2022 first-round pick, and a 2021 second-round pick from the Cavs, if they have that. It's a good idea. It gets the Wolves kind of a low-key super team with Russell, old K-Love, and Towns, and then also Jarrett Culver and other guys, and whoever their 2020 first-round picks ends up becoming. That's a pretty good team, if you ask me, especially since Russell and Towns are friends. And for the Wolves, this mostly benefits the Wolves. Like, there's no other way to spin this, that the Wolves are the clear winners of this trade. And maybe I'm a little bit biased, because I'm definitely a Wolves fan.
And I might be giving them an unfair advantage, but
I don't want to see them stuck in the muck of the bottom for another 15 years. And we have a way out. The Hornets are so desperate they'll try anything, so they trade all their expiring contracts for Andrew Wiggins, who's still like only 24. So he could end up being something on a team like Charlotte, where there's almost nothing else in his way. The Wolves get Kevin Love, who may be on a bad contract, but he's a fan favorite, and or sort of a fan favorite. Still mad that he requested that trade. And then we have D'Angelo Russell, who is great friends with Karl-Anthony Towns, good young player. And of course we have Towns, former number 1 overall pick, and he has definitely lived up to that. Unfortunately, we lose Robert Covington. We'll probably release Jeff Teague from cap hold, because we don't want his $20 million stuck on our cap, on our payroll. I am lingering on this a lot, so I'll just leave it at the Wolves win, the Warriors win because they get Robert Covington an expiring contract, and the Cavs win because they get expiring contracts on top of being able to get out from under Kevin Love's contract. The only bad thing is that they lose out on those draft picks, but I mean, second round picks aren't that important. And then the Hornets win because they get literally anything. Moving on. I'll talk a little bit more about the Warriors just because this is such an interesting team from that point. After this, they would have a starting lineup of basically
Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Robert Covington, maybe Omari Spellman, maybe someone else, and Willie Cauley-Stein.
I don't even know if they'd have a good point guard off the bench, but they would still have that lineup. They still have some okay bench guys. Kevon Looney is nice, but I shouldn't be lingering on the Warriors. Let's move on. Let's talk about the Clippers. They have a good chance to make it out of the West. They signed Kawhi, and then on top of that, they managed to trade for Paul George, while unfortunately losing Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. That's the price for getting Paul George. and it's kind of okay that they got off of Danilo Gallinari's money because he was on a big contract, but it wasn't really overpaying. They traded a ton of draft picks, but I think that's fine when you have Kawhi, Paul George.
And they still have
A couple young players. Montrezl Harrell's good for them. They managed to re-sign Ivica Zubac, who is pretty good.
for them.
They have JaMychal Green, who is pretty good on their superstar timeline and really fits well with them. Can come off the bench and also shoot threes, kind of like Bobby Portis in that respect. They managed to get Mo Harkless. It's a good pickup for them. They didn't have to give up much for him. And I think the really big news, and the thing that's kind of troubling for them, is that Kawhi Leonard signed a shorter contract,
2 + 1 years, $103 million.
which really shrinks their window to win a championship for him. It's not like he needs a championship. He just won one in Toronto. But it would obviously still be nice if Kawhi could win another championship in LA. And Paul George also hasn't won one yet, and neither have the Clippers as a franchise, so that's nice too. This has very big implications for the 2021 offseason, in that it might just be like this offseason or last offseason. If we're having this kind of offseason every 2-3 years, every even 1 or 2 years,
Then we may end up with an NBA where all this craziness just happens every few years to the point where it's really just normalized.
which is kind of a scary thought. It's not going to be like the 80s or 90s, or 70s, certainly not like the 70s. And then again, nothing is. The Paul George trade just recently hit me, and it shook me, as it shook everyone. And they are possible champions. Then again, everyone is. Let's talk about the Rockets, Thunder, and Heat now. They have a big trade. I'm gonna start by quick covering the Knicks. They got a bunch of average guys, but they're gearing up for 2021. I don't like what they're doing. They're not getting draft picks, but then again, you don't need draft picks if you're thinking you're gonna get friggin' Bradley Beal and Kawhi Leonard. One thing they could do right now to attract guys, maybe, is by trading for Russell Westbrook. Now I know this trade has already been made. Basic straight up swap of Russell Westbrook, Chris Paul, and draft picks. But they could still restructure this deal and trade these guys in this massive, massive, massive deal that goes kind of like this. The Thunder get Dennis Smith Jr., James Johnson, Justice Winslow, Dion Waiters, and Daniel House. The Miami Heat get Chris Paul, Eric Gordon, Andre Roberson, and Frank Ntilikina. The Knicks get Russell Westbrook and 3 draft picks. The Rockets get Goran Dragic, Dennis Schroeder, Alonzo Trier, Reggie Bullock, and Wayne Ellington. Now the reason this is good for the Thunder is they're pretty much going all in on tanking, and Chris Paul is not going to help that. He's not really fan service anymore. He's not going to draw in big
Crowds or money or whatever.
so they may as well just go in on full tanking mode if they're dead set on trading Russell Westbrook, who doesn't even want to be there anymore, without a supporting cast. They get expiring contracts, they get point justice, and they get Dennis Smith Jr. for a trio of playmaking guards that can also be really big and just overpower other players. Dennis Smith Jr. can be kind of like a mini Westbrook, basically.
They also get rid of longtime veterans who might hurt their tanking and also take up salary space. They do still have to take in the Heat's expiring contracts.
Oh yeah, and the Thunder also get Daniel House, who is good. The Heat, they get Chris Paul, who is probably a better fit alongside Jimmy Butler than, say, Russell Westbrook, because Russell Westbrook is Russell Westbrook, and he's a ball handler who jacks up shots, and he's worse at it than Jimmy Butler, who really likes having the ball in his hands and getting buckets. Chris Paul can be kind of a secondary ball handler who can also play off the ball occasionally. They also get Eric Gordon, who's a nice bench piece, Andre Roberson, who is a nice defensive wing to kind of foil Tyler Harrow. And then they get Frank Ntilikina, who is a good backup point guard, which is not something that they'll have once they trade away both Goran Dragic and Justice Winslow. The Knicks, of course, get Russell Westbrook, and they get rid of some of the excess depth. Because I'll say it now, depth is good. Being 18 men deep is not. Players want to play, young guys need to be developed. Choose one. Don't be the Lakers. The Rockets, they get out from under Chris Paul. They get Goran Dragic, who is a nice temporary 1-year rental for them to fit alongside James Harden. Can do a lot of the stuff that Chris Paul did, while also being a better shooter than Chris Paul and not demanding as much money. Alonzo Trier can eventually develop into kind of a replacement for Eric Gordon. In the meantime, they have Reggie Bullock and Wayne Ellington to fill in for his previous role of just being a launcher. They can both play defense, spot up, run around the court like madmen, and just be good 3-and-D wings in general. Dennis Schroeder may be a tad bit overpaid, but he's good off the bench, so that'll be good for them. Russell Westbrook may kind of attract free agents in 2021, especially guys who can shoot, but this may encourage Russ's bad behavior of just jacking up whatever shot comes at him. Or it might not. Outside of the Knicks had built up kind of a culture of just being a team.
I mean, of course they were tanking, but David Fizdale still did his best to cultivate the young guys.
Or at least they had wanted to do that, going like 16 guys deep, veterans, guys who liked to play with each other, who knew their role and were okay with it. And also the young guys who were good, young, versatile, and willing to do anything that the coach wanted. So that'll be good. If the Heat do this, they instantly become second round contenders. If the Thunder do this, they immediately become bottom feeder contenders. If the Rockets do this, then they become like the Rockets of 2016-17. Just Harden and shooters.
I wanted to talk for just a little bit about what would happen if the original deal goes through. I think the Thunder still trade Chris Paul to the Heat. They still get most of the same assets that they got in my incarnation of the trade, but I think that the Heat don't get anything except Chris Paul, because otherwise they'd have to take back a lot more money and trade away a lot more assets, which I don't think they really want. Anyway, the more interesting part is how the Russell Westbrook would fit with James Harden. I think in order to make this work, Mike D'Antoni is going to have to get them involved in a more intricate, complicated offense where they're literally doing anything except my turn, your turn ISOs, and one of them just stands on the perimeter literally doing nothing. Maybe they do handoffs, maybe they set screens, although I don't really see them doing that for each other, just based on how their play styles have been. A lot of these points were made in Kane Loves Cali's video. I think that was him. Anyway, I agree with all those things, and I'm trying to put them in my own words. Russell Westbrook toned down his all fiery and all my ball alpha dog play style a little bit. He still averaged a triple-double, but it seemed more like a real triple-double. Like, he's not just stat padding. His assists are actual assists, and they were all made to help the team. His points were toned down so that Paul George could do more of that. His rebounds, I still think he might have been stat padding on some of those. But, you know, it's fine. Russell Westbrook is a good rebounder anyway. And I think on defense, this team can be really good. James Harden, as of late, has actually been trying on defense, so maybe that'll continue, and maybe transfer over to Russell Westbrook. So now we have two players that were friends, are great on defense, and also have improved their play to where one of them might be the offensive star, but both of them are willing to let each other take a turn. And maybe all that happens. Maybe this works out perfectly and exceeds the Chris Paul, James Harden duo, but there's still a high chance that it doesn't. This might probably end up being like a 3-part series, maybe even 4-part, but like I'll have to try and schedule this where I will release one video every 3 some days. And then I definitely failed at my challenge of doing all 30 NBA teams in one video. I couldn't even do it all in one sitting. So I'll see you in part 2. Hope you enjoyed part 1. Do basketball. Goodbye, everyone.